It's all yours, Parmjit.
Cool. Uh, Hello, folks. This is Paramjit, and welcome to Purdeep and Paramjit show. How are you, man?
I'm good. It's funny when you say that because I always say the Parmjit and Pradeep show.
Yeah, it's actually. I think it sounds very well. So it's organic way of running the conversation. So how's everything going, Purdeep?
Everything is good. It's March 10th today as we're doing this episode. So kids are going on spring break here pretty soon. So in one aspect, it's nice because they'll have some time off. On the other aspect, it's like okay, we're gonna have to keep them busy for a week.
Yes, of course. Means I think it can go both way. Means if you have a busy week schedule for your own work, and then kids have to be taken care of, that actually can throw a spanner in the whole thing.
Hmm.
But that brings us to the topic we wanted to converse about today, and that how do you grow a family business, how do you manage the entrepreneurial pursuits as well as your family. You have kids, you have spouse, you have parent, you have brother, you and of course extended families, and um, beyond certain limits certain things have to be taken care of within the family. So how do you manage this? Is there any particular strategies you use, or you have a template which you want to work through as you are running your business, or have been trying to help other people run business and set up um, their things?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I would like to say that there's a template that you can use and just repeat the results for every single person out there, for every single entrepreneur or business owner. But it's definitely not the case because every family is different. And my family is different. The way we operate, the way I operate is different. Just to give you an example, we live in an area where we don't have a lot of family around. My wife's family is an hour away and even their family is small, and all of my family is back in British Columbia, and we have a huge family there. Our dynamic would be different uh, being there. And I was thinking about this the other day, Parmji, because I don't think I would have been able to focus so much on my business had I been around so many of my extended family. Because it's allowed me, there's pros and cons to that, but it's allowed me to actually focus on my immediate family and focus on my business. Because if I was back in BC full time and trying to grow it, I think I'd be pulled into a number of different directions. Um, so, if I was to say, how do you do it? I think the first thing that we have to take a look at is our priorities, and that's just like anything in life is starting with your priorities, and your priorities come from your goals. And one of the things that I would say to balance a successful business and a successful family, and I don't mean successful from a monetary perspective, I mean just a happy, healthy, collaborative family where people are getting along and respect each other and love each other and growing with each other. It requires to have goals for both. And as entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs don't have goals for the business or sorry, for the family. They have goals for their business, and so bringing this area to light to ask them, "Hey, what are your goals for your family?" I think gets them to change their mindset a little bit and look at things differently.
It's interesting you say that, because means I can add my thoughts about that. I We don't absolutely have any family. So for example, it's not, we don't even have a family, immediate family, hours away or 2 hours away. The closest relative we have, relative I'm talking about, means immediate family relative, is actually few hours in Regina, and that's brother of my wife. And our old long-time friends are all in almost 100 kilometer where we live. So we don't have any family actually where we live. And my biological family is back in India. My wife's family is back in India. So it's actually interesting that the development of business or development of anything, there's a pros and cons to it. There are many times we wish that uh, uh, that we would have, it would have been nice if we had any family around,
Mhm.
because in the past, uh, all these almost 2 decades, we have never left our kids with anybody, because we don't have anybody with whom we can actually put on the responsibility. We have friends around. They will be happy to take in, but we just don't want to impose. So I don't recall a day in the last 2 decades where we have left our kids um, with someone and
Wow, two
went out.
decades?
Yes, we have not,
Wow,
because we don't have any family around. The
wow.
only time now we can, for example, my other half and I can we can go shopping is because our daughter is old enough to take care of the son. So there's actually huge range of pros and cons to that, but
Mhm,
I don't want to hijack the discussion by pumping this. I want to bring your attention to something you said, which I also noticed, that entrepreneurial people, they often good at managing business relationships,
mhm.
but at the same time they can, if you allow me to use this word, they suck uh, at managing family relationship. They
Mhm,
can have a wonderful relationship with outside business relationship, but they somehow they don't know how to actually manage the relationship with the immediate family, which means in some ways a lot more important, because you live with your family a lot more than you live with your business associates. so
mhm.
so that has been my observation, but I want to bring you in and share your thoughts. And uh, what do you think, why does it happen? How often you see it, and is there any remedy for that?
Yeah, and I think it depends as well in terms of if we talk about genders as well, because I think men are different than women, but that's starting to change as well because there's a lot more driven women who have executive careers or businesses themselves that are kind of falling into that same trap that men do, which is focusing so much on the business and less on the family aspect. And that's really what it comes down to is we, especially as men, we tie our identity to our professions or our business, and it's very much a part of who we are. Although we want to be good fathers and husbands as well, today's society, especially, people get recognized based on their status of their business or career or how much money they make. So we identify with that. Very rarely do you hear people talking about how good of a father that person is or how good of a husband that person is, right? We're always talking about success. And and this is something really interesting, Parmjit. When I came here, my wife's not around. She's going to pick up the kids. But I can openly say this because it was before we got married. But when I was dating, when I came here to the Toronto or the Ontario area, one of the first questions that the women had here when we would go on a date is, "What do you do?" And even, "Okay, what level of success do you have?" Like, and it wasn't from the point of being genuinely interested in me. It's about where my status was. And I found that to be very interesting. And I would jokingly say that I'm an apple picker. And I would say that because, that's part-time. My profession is we have the apple orchard and I am an apple picker, but I would jokingly say that to see their reaction. So I think society has a big part to play in that in terms of why we focus. And I think it's ultimately coming down to focus, Parmjeet. And also there's a skill level because you're from the academic world as well, as you understand that we're not innately born with great communication skills, right? We're not trained to communicate effectively or focus on relationships. It's an inherent evolutionary trait that we have, but it takes fine tuning. And yes, you can go to business school and learn that, but they don't teach those soft skills. Well, I think they're starting to now, but they never taught us the soft skills about relationships, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father. So I think that's where the challenge is in terms of where society puts their focus.
Exactly. I think this is something I've also noticed in the courses I had run so far in the Degroote Business School, that a lot of executives, they oftenly downplay the value of emotions in almost anything. Means I don't think, I have not heard anybody saying that I should not have healthy emotions,
Mhm.
uh, but they compartmentalize that emotions that work for you in the family relationship, like your relationship with your wife or your kids or your neighbors, are equally relevant as it is actually relationship with other people, because ultimately at the end of the day you are the same person who is extending to make the relationship. So it's actually very interesting in the context of entrepreneurs, that they oftenly underplay the value of emotions. Means one of the question I often would ask when I'm running those leadership courses is that how many of you think that if you take away the runaway emotions, your decision making capability will become better? And invariably,
Mm.
almost everybody will say that I would be that one. I want that runaway mind or emotion to be taken away. L- s- Bring a magic wand and take it away, and I know I will be better decision making maker. I know how many time emotions hijack my mind. And then I will tell them that, it's very interesting you say that, because you tend to assume that emotions are the stumbling blocks, decision making. But interestingly enough, if you take out the emotions from the decision making process, we don't make decisions, especially when it is related to other people. Well,
Mm.
you can continue to crunch numbers, you will be great as an accountant, you may be great as a gambler, but you will be a terrible spouse, a terrible father, terrible mother, a terrible neighbor to live with, because you would not know how to relate to other people, because emotions are a kind of a vehicle through which we connect. So it's kind of that kind of a misgivings or confusions, and how the emotions are demonized in real life. Uh, but going back to your thought, when you meet somebody who is like that, for example, who quantifies you, like the person you meet and they say, what do you do? The meaning of that question is, I think it's a politically correct way of sizing you up or down. It's a really a quantification process, that okay, are you good enough or quantitatively enough for them to pay attention or not?
Yeah.
So what do you do that, what do you tell those people who actually fall victim to that?
Well, I think essentially, so in that situation, in that dating situation, I can understand that because women, that's one of the things that they evaluate is how good the man can actually take care or provide for the household. So that's understandable. When I speak to men about this, in the coaching and advising that we do with men, is ultimately if we take a look at what they are looking for in life, even though they want to have success in their business, that's why coming back to this question, how do I grow my family business? They really want to be successful in their family. That's ultimately their goal. That's what they're trying to achieve. They want to make more money and all this kind of stuff. They want to have the status, but underlying, they do want to be a better father. They do want to be there more for their kids and have that time with their kids. But it's because of our social, you can say, influence that it's not brought up to that level. So that's why we have these open conversations with them. And when I go through this discovery phase, we find out what they're truly looking for. They want to have a better health. They want to be there for their kids. They want to be able to go on vacations and not think about work all the time. These are the things that they want. So from there, once they identify that and say it's not socially in or it's not socially incorrect to actually care about your family and say, hey, you know what, the heck with business. If I'm off for a week, I'm off for a week. Um, because that's a society that we've come to now is always on. Then they realize, okay, it's okay to do things differently. I don't have to live my life this way. And then when we can actually have those open conversations, we can actually structure goals. And everything that I talk about really comes back to goals as we we talk about the brain, especially in being a goal driven type of an organ. If you don't have a goal, then your brain will find some goal to chase. And it's not typically your own goal, and sometimes it's not a healthy one. So that's Parmji, that's where we start, is having these open conversations. And I always tell people to take a weekend off, right? This is part of the exercise that we do. Take a weekend off for a few hours or a day, um, and try to envision your life the way you want it to be without any social influence. I know that's hard to do. It's very hard to do. And it's almost impossible because there's always influence underlying, right, at the unconscious level. But as much as we can try to pull away from that and say, okay, if my parents didn't want me to live this way, if my wife didn't want me to live this way, if I didn't have pressure from my colleagues or whatever it is, what kind of life do I want to have? If you can get to that point and really lay that out for yourself, or at least have a little bit more clarity, then it makes your business goals a lot easier, because a lot of people are just growing their business for the sake of growing their business without ultimately knowing where it's going to lead them. So clarity, I think clarity is important in life, Parmji. You've probably seen this as well when you're doing your executive courses.
Exactly. Actually, your conversation reminds me of something we were talking with our students at Mac yesterday. So there's a fourth year course. It's called Professional Transitions. So it is about transitions. That transitions happen not only once or twice, but students are often introduced to the idea of transitions almost jarringly at the undergraduate when you're trying to get out of the undergraduate into the more graduate programs or in professional schools, that it becomes a quite jarring transition for them. So we were talking about this, the whole idea that in order for you to help yourself or become a better negotiator of transitions, which are an inevitable part of life, it transitions continue to happen. They continue to happen not only once twice but almost every day there's a different transition. Some are more abrupt and some are more notable, but we transition every day. And one of the things we all somehow explored together is the idea of clarity, is as you were saying that you need to, as a human being, you need to get out of the din of your mind in a very self-reflective way. And when I use the word self-reflective, because it's a oftenly quite used, misused, abused word in an environment which people do counseling, coaching, and all these things, because reflection is a useful tool, but it's a useful tool only when it is used preponderantly in a non-judgmental way.
Mm.
So I'm using this word very carefully, is because I don't mean to say the self-reflection is good or bad. Self-reflection can take good or bad depending on how you deploy it. So say if I am obsessively self-reflective and I'm judgmental at the same time, I'm going to trigger rumination thought process, and that will lead to the negative self-talk, and then there's a risk factor for going into depressive syndromes and all those kind of things. So having that kind of a daily practice of uh, reflecting about yourself, but not in a judgmental way, can be a wonderful way to actually develop clarity.
Mm.
And that's true for entrepreneurs, that's true for a housewife, that's true for a, a businessman, that's true for a student, that's true for a prof, that's true for anybody, because we all want to be clear when our mind is not bubbling.
So what do you suggest for them from that perspective? Is there a certain exercise that you suggest?
So I'm biased here, so I this is what I said to my students, that remember that all of us have our biases, and I am, as a role of facilitator, I have my bias. So for me, the my personal way of reflecting or in non-judgmental ways is to meditate. So I'm a Vipassana student for a very long time, and that's what I do. But again, I don't say that you should do that, but I would suggest and invite that you should do something which allows your mind and body to rest,
Hmm.
because rest creates the possibility for clarity.
Hmm.
When we are not rested, um, regardless of how we feel, our mind is bubbling, our body is tense and antsy, the thought process is always jagged and all over the place. So we need some sort of a rest, whatever rest you want. So in no way inviting people that to prescribe that you should meditate. People pray, and a prayer is, even though it has a slightly different way of doing things than meditation, but prayer is still a attempt to rest. And also, second part to the whole thing, to step out of our own egocentric mind.
Hmm.
And I think in both meditation, if it is done correctly, and in prayer, we step out of egocentric, because for that moment when we are praying, you're praying to something outside of you.
Hmm.
Whether you are religious or not, that's beside the point. We can argue about that. I think that's a like dog trying to catch its tail. It never ends. But the fact is that you step out of those egocentric self. That when we step out of the egocentric, we rest our worries and anxieties into a bigger universal force. And that's why some people do prayer and some people meditation do, but even though that has slightly different, from my perspective it will be different. So that's one thing I suggested to my student. I think it's very relevant to even entrepreneurs. Take time to rest,
Hmm.
whatever that rest means for you.
Yeah, I like that approach because life and society is so fast and so busy, especially as an entrepreneur. It's very difficult to have that. Well, if you've set your business up properly, it's not. But if you're go 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 all the time, how are you supposed to reflect? It's very difficult to do because your mind is constantly racing, and that's what continues in that cycle, right? You get caught in that vicious cycle, because if you can't rest your mind, and your thoughts are continuing to go, you don't have that time to self reflect and do things differently that maybe take you down a different path, or maybe may cause you to think, hey, look, is my approach, and I was just talking to someone today where I said, I feel like I need to wipe out half my mind because the way I'm looking at this problem or this situation, it's not working. Because I'm looking at it from my own perspective. I need a completely different perspective to be able to overcome this, or see it from a different angle. And that's something I think we can talk about in another episode. But I know we've kind of gone around this topic of how do I grow my family business, because I think we've talked about a lot of the things that lead to having more clarity so you can grow your family business. And so if there's one thing I think I want to leave the audience for this episode, is when you get more clear and you have more clarity about your life, that gives you a point or even motivation to be able to grow your business effectively. Because without that clarity, you will just grow it. You might not grow it in the right way. You might grow it for the wrong reasons. And ultimately what ends up happening, and we see this in business cycles all the time in businesses, is I call it the three-legged race. Is you end up taking 3 steps forward, you trip, and you fall behind 2 steps, and then you got to get up and do it again. Well, the more you learn to get in sync with yourself, with your mind, right, and your true intentions, what you're looking for, I think it's easier to have that race.
Exactly. I think clarity, if I may add, and then we can wrap this up, means clarity is a natural process of minimalizing. So rather than running on three legs, you run on two legs, and two legs are better negotiable than three legs. And having 10,000 thoughts in your mind are worse than having 5,000 thoughts in your mind. So I tend to think that all this comes down to very simple things. So maybe in the context of our conversation, that how do I grow my family business, we can leave the audience with one thing, that find a way to cultivate clarity. And maybe the way to clarity could be through rest, whatever that mean to you. We don't want to prescribe it. There are multiple ways you can actually rest, but try this. And again, as we say, and we started at the beginning of our this series, that our invitation here is based on curiosity. We don't want to prescribe you. This is something we do, and this is something we live through, and we are open for any feedback, experimental feedback. So if you test drive it and you find that your experience, we will love to hear from you. So maybe, Pradeep, I think on that note, on the note of clarity, that one of the way to grow family business is to be very clear about and develop a clarity about what you really want to accomplish from that effort. We can leave that to our audience. Would you like to add
Yeah.
something
No,
to?
I think that's great, because if you're looking for technical strategies to grow your business, please send us an email or insight, and we're more than happy to tackle it from that perspective. But yeah, thank you, Parmjit. Thank you for you watching out there and subscribing to our channel. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. If you find this conversation useful, kindly subscribe, share, give us some feedback. We will be very grateful. Until next time, stay curious and reasonably non judgmental.
Of course.